WFM 91.7. This is Big Question on Women Radio 91.7, Nigeria's first and only radio station for women and their families. We are unapologetically for women, and we remain a tool for women's development and your most reliable and leading source of information for women. On the Big Question this morning, which is the 20th of July 2021, on the Big Question, we are going to be looking at the impact of flooding on Nigerians, and the Director of Research and Policy at Space for Change, Victoria Ibezim Oheri, is my guest on the radio this morning. Nigeria has Africa's biggest economy and a population of over 200 million. Nigeria faces numerous challenges as it struggles to achieve the sustainable development goals, with flooding being most serious with wide-reaching impact. And on this morning conversation, we are going to be exploring ways the impact of flooding on Nigerians and how we can come out of this. I'm sure in the last week Friday, we all saw the episode of rain that fell, and that has been said by the Nigerian Hydrological Center to be the list, that there is more to come with regards to the rain. Good morning. Thank you for joining us, Victoria.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, this is another opportunity again where we're talking about this issue of flooding in our country, and I want to ask: is it like we have not consistently learned? Consistently learned from the previous experiences that we have had, that we are having like a repeat, but this time around, not just a repeat, but even worse experience from what we experienced the last time before this episode?
Yeah. Good morning, listeners. I agree with you that we would have learned some lessons. I think the country finds itself in a difficult place. The popular cliche would say between the devil and the deep blue sea. It's not just easy to say, oh, we'll learn from past mistakes. Some of the things required they require long-term planning. They require a lot of resources, and you can't achieve some of them without inflicting enormous pain on citizens as well. And it's a combination of so many factors, and the rains are not stopping to say, okay, let me give you a little break to go and plan.
Okay. So
every July to September, whether we like it or not, the heavy rains come. So it's just a combination of many things, and it's sad that we are still where we are at the moment. And I still empathize with all the people who are affected or displaced by last week's rains.
Well, a lot of people on the island had their vehicles damaged. In fact, this is really devastating, how certain car parks were flooded and certain areas. And this has been happening over and over again. You mentioned something earlier that for us to have to avert this flood that is happening in the country, it would have an enormous impact on the people. Like the pain would be much. How do you mean?
Okay. For us to talk about flooding, we have to look at what are the causes.
Okay.
What are the major causes, and then it can help us understand how addressing it might also cause some pain. Then in terms of the primary causes, the one I mentioned it before, heavy rains combined with poor drainage systems and blocked waterways. We also have overpopulation. I think there's a UN report that says that Nigeria will be among one of the third most populous nations in the world by 2050.
Okay.
So that overpopulation causes pressure on land and the need for more housing. Then we also have the issue of poor enforcement, ineffective urban planning, and town planning, which is, the poor enforcement of our zoning and planning regulations. And then the last one, which is ill preparation. Okay. I've mentioned that requires long-term planning.
Okay.
It requires, quite a lot, infrastructure to manage flood. Then how will it cause pain? I've mentioned that we have, poor enforcement of zoning and planning regulations, which means that because of the overpopulation, a lot of people have built houses on waterways.
Victoria, I'm sorry. Victoria, I'm sorry. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Sorry,
you.
I want to pause your thoughts there, but you talked about lack of enforcement of proper planning and, building on waterways. Is this an issue of us individuals not obeying these things? Because I take a look at a particular area.
I was coming to that.
Okay.
I was coming to that, and how it relates to pain. A lot of people, particularly in Lagos, they have built on waterways. Waterways means maybe the house is on a floodplain. That's the channel that water naturally would follow to pass. When you build a house on it, water will find its way. It means that the housing has caused a massive obstruction. So the water will either flood somewhere or cause damage or pain somewhere. So for governments to fully achieve 100% zero flooding, it means a lot of buildings may have to go down. That is what I meant by it will cause pain.
Okay.
And if you look at the number of houses in this city that have been built in inappropriate places, if you pull down all those houses in 1 year, the kind of outcry you'll see in this city, it will be enormous. So I think the government is just trying to manage it, and the more we manage it, the more flooding we experience, and the more flooding we experience, the more pain.
But is that not also averting the greater danger? If these buildings which are on waterways where water is supposed to go through, and we are managing the situation instead of, I understand the impact that this would have on the, the housing in Lagos. But if we keep going this way, are we not averting a greater danger when there would be a flood that would actually sweep that house itself that we could have taken away and saved lives and property?
Yes, that is the mathematics. That is, you're following it logically. That is actually how it should be. And the first thing that those houses should never have been allowed there in the first place. They should never have been allowed to build in the first place. So, and the people selling should never have even sold in the first place. But some of these mistakes have been made, and correcting them. And the problem with these mistakes is that they are in multiple locations. And multiple incidents in multiple locations. So let's say like there are 10,000 houses obstructing waterways in Lagos. If you pull down 10,000 houses in Lagos today, it also creates another additional problem, which is a problem of massive homelessness, housing crisis. So why I mentioned the deep pool and the deep blue sea. So you have to take one. Do you want to deal with flooding that comes occasionally, or do you want to deal with housing crisis that permanently displaces people, and you need even more billions to address that problem? So it's between being in a hard and a difficult place.
This is The Big Question on Women Radio 91.7. Today on The Big Question, 25 minutes past 9, we are talking with regards to the impact of flooding on Nigerians. And this is a very solid conversation that we're having this morning with the Director of Research and Policy Spaces for Change. Now, let's look at this, Victoria. I've had a conversation with a couple of people. Do you think that even if we had buildings on waterways, right? I have always suggested that, I don't know, and some have faulted this idea of us ensuring that every house is given a standard, a universal standard of what the size of drainage should be. So if you are building your house and you are putting your fence in front of your house, you are also drilling your drainage with the standard size. Because the fact that we are dependent on the government to come do these things for us, even though we know that it is the responsibility of the government, but at the way things are going right now, can we continually wait for the government to come drill this drainage and make sure the drainages are cleared?
I actually think citizens have been building drainages for the most part. Particularly in new areas, citizens have been building their drainages by themselves, cleaning it by themselves. Government builds drainages, but in so many locations, I know citizens have been taking up that responsibility. So the question is whether it meets the specifications. Then that's another conversation. Okay. And before you ask people, you build this gutter according to this specification. And the question would be, I hope you are providing the resources, where the resources will come from, for people to meet your specification. So people build drainages in front of their homes. It could be substandard, but they do it according to their own means. Remember, they are taking over a role that traditionally belongs to the government. So that is part of the challenge. There are so many fundamental problems that, for you to address them, you have to go back to the basis. And because incrementally, those problems are not being solved. So the cracks continue to widen and create more problems.
Yeah. When we look at this issue of dam, there's a recent report in which that it said that Cameroon had advised that we actually build a particular dam because of the water that would be outflown from their region into our country. What are your thoughts on the fact that that had not been taken into cognizance, or much attention had not been paid to that report from Cameroon by the Nigerian government?
Okay, so the name of the dam is called the Lagdo Dam. It's in neighboring Cameroon and is on the river, Benue River. It runs through Nigeria, and from time to time it poses a danger of heavy flooding. Because what usually happens is that the dam accumulates a lot of water. When it reaches a certain water level, the water weight becomes heavy on the dam, so they have to release the excess water. Whenever Cameroon authorities release that excess water, it spills over, because remember, the dam is on the river Benue, which crosses many states in Nigeria. When they release that excess water, all those states are submerged. So the advice, I think they did that happened in 2014 and 2016.
2016, yes.
Yeah, 2014 and 2016, the worst, devastation caused by, overflow of that dam. So the conversation has been on whether between Nigeria and Cameroon authorities to build alternative dams in Nigeria that can help hold water, should something happen. But that hasn't happened. That's what I said at the beginning. Remember, I mentioned that it requires long-term planning.
Yes.
You don't build a dam in 3 months. These are things that need to be thought through. These are priorities that we need to keep drumming to our leaders, our representatives, to drum it to their ears that these are priorities that, that they should bring to the front burner, that require immediate attention, urgent attention. But that, priority setting has not really happened. And that is why we're where we are at the moment.
If we go on with this conversation, and I want us to a little bit streamline it with, the responsibility of government understanding this impact. There is a Ministry of Environment, and which I want to ask, do you think that the Ministry of Environment in the last decade and the last 10 years have shown capacity to really understanding their role in ensuring that we do not have disasters that are caused by flood?
You and I know the answers to that question, and I think the Federal Ministry of Environment doesn't act alone. Remember, there's a counterpart Ministry of Environment also across states that should work together with the Federal Ministry of Environment to enforce all national and state environmental regulations. There's been a huge gap between policy and practice, and also between practice and enforcement, which is responsible for some of the devastations that we're seeing. And we are hoping that maybe as we are making plans for 2023, is a time to bring in new leaders who understand the importance of protecting our environment. People who understand the importance of making sure that the environment is managed in ways that minimize potential harms to citizens, and people who can increase allocation, financial or budgetary allocation to environmental protection. So maybe if you look at the budget and see the amount of money budgeted for environmental protection, it can also give you some answers why there's a lot of underperformance on the part of those ministries.
I agree with you. This is The Big Question, 29 minutes to 10. If you are just joining us this morning, do well to be part of this conversation. You can call us up. Let's know what was the situation like in your area with regards to flood. I'm my producer is telling me that it's about to rain again today. We don't know how heavy this one might be, but the clouds look very dark and heavy, and I'm hoping it's not too heavy a rain, because it rains and you just get worried.
Yeah. Particularly people living in low-lying areas. Mm-hmm. And we're also concerned about people living in the informal settlements, because many of those areas are low marshlands, and the density, population density in those areas are also a thing of concern, which means that if the water comes, more populations are at risk. And not just more populations are at risk, people within the low income bracket, meaning that they need help. Okay. They are not able to solve those problems by themselves without external support or some form of humanitarian assistance. So this is really a clarion call to both the government and to all those who can render support, that there are lots of people living in locations that are really trying locations that need support at this time. We can't just wait until they cry out. We just have to extend our helping hands to people in those localities and see how they can be helped.
Okay. Now let's look at something that has been happening most recently. I've been seeing, there are so many real estate coming up right now, especially for Lagos, Ogun, Ibadan. I'm hearing a lot more real estate, but I've observed something in the most recent time in some areas. I'm not even talking about the island right now. I know some areas on the mainland that are waterlogged areas that have been sand-filled and now being sold as landed property for people who are looking to own houses and the likes. What are the implications of building houses or on sand-filled lands that were originally waterlogged areas, and now they're now being converted into solid ground for buildings to stay on them?
I'm not an engineer, but I know that engineering makes things like that possible.
Yes.
Why I say that is, look at Eco Atlantic City, for instance, that emerged completely from the ocean. So I think there are ways, it's like some engineering stuff that could happen to ensure some kind of soil stability and structural integrity for those structures. But it requires some investment. You don't build in those areas the way you build on dry land. So the question would be whether that higher level of engineering standards are being met. And again, it goes back to what we were discussing before, which is enforcement of regulations. Those who are responsible for enforcing those standards need to weigh in, to understand, to check whether the buildings in those localities meet those standards. And another thing that gives that confidence, if you look at in Venice, there are buildings on water.
Okay.
There are buildings on water. It's a tourist location. People go there, and so those buildings, we have not heard that the houses are collapsing. Okay. So there's a technology for that, and the question is making sure that some technology is available for people living in those localities.
All right. Is there anything that we need to be worried about the Eco Atlantic City? Because as much as I am progressive with technology and the times that we have found ourselves, there's also a need for us to, what would be the repercussion effect of this impact of this smart city that we're trying to build on the lowland communities where these waters are being pushed into?
Yeah, my fear is not just about Eco Atlantic. I once saw a report, stumbled on a report that said that by 2050 the whole of Lagos will be underwater, and that Lagos will disappear. And I said, "Oh, this is our beautiful Lagos. How can it go under Lagos to go under water?" So some of those developments. I'm not an engineer. I am not, I know the engineers can give us some advice, but we need a lot of information. We know that because of the dredging or the sand filling that is going on, that water is being pushed elsewhere.
Yes.
That water is going elsewhere. That water did not disappear. It didn't dry up. So the consequences those type of operations have on outlying communities, on other nearby coastal communities. It needs to be studied and the evidence used to inform policy and planning. I know that there is a lot of appetite to copy what we see in Dubai, what we see in other Western countries to make Lagos look like those localities. But it's important that we keep emphasizing to authorities that contexts differ. Contexts differ and contexts matter. That what is built in locality A may not withstand the pressure in locality B. And there is no need. Those two localities can still have their distinct features and still be beautiful. So these are conversations that need to be had at different levels, not just on radio, but in policy circles, in civil society, in government, at the budgetary tables, so that we reach a consensus and common understanding of the kind of development that we need in Lagos.
All right. 23 minutes to 10. This is still the big question on Women Radio 91.7. And on the big question this morning, we're talking about the impact of flooding in Nigeria. A very important one. The rains are coming and they're coming really heavy. Now, in a time like this, where we have consistently abused our waterways, we have blocked drainages and all of that, how do we is there any last minute thing we can do in the middle of this raining season? Because September has been said to would be the peak time for a place like Lagos and Nigeria, where we would have heavy downpour. And I'm hopeful that we would have the August break like we used to, and see how we would not have rainfall in August. And is there anything we can do to even reduce the impact of what the flooding would be like?
Yeah, yes, there's some things that we can do. Residents dump rubbish and waste on the streets, putting extra strain on the few, existing urban drainage systems. And when they do that, it prevents steady flow of rainwater. And that needs to stop. And there's need for more aggressive sensitization. I know the Lagos State Urban Resilience Office. I also know that the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency, they're doing a lot, providing information, providing predictions, forecasts that can help governments to plan. It's not just enough. If they are doing that, government needs to listen to them. Because some of these forecasts, were made as early as March.
Yes.
So the question is, you have to throw the question to government, what has been done since that March? That is also some sufficient time. But I think those agencies will continue their outreach, their sensitization of citizens to keep, it's the duty of the government to clean drainages and to, pack refuse and all of that. But we still owe that duty to ourselves to keep our environment clean, to make sure that those waterways remain open and free. And again, in those localities where government has not provided adequate sanitary facilities, they need because if you don't, people generate waste every day. So if you don't provide them means, formal mechanism to dispose their waste, they will improvise, and that improvisation, most times they use illegal ways to achieve those ends. So it's a two-way thing. You have an obligation on the part of citizens, you also have obligations on the part of the government. But a lot of sensitization, like even the one you're doing on radio now, will help a lot of people understand that this thing comes back to self. When you are in that bus, you finish drinking and you throw the bottle away. Wherever you are, you finish a piece of gala, you throw it away. It comes back to the society. When the roads block, you're also contributing to the to the flooding. And another thing I think I must mention, the use of plastics. Plastics are used irresponsibly in the city of Lagos. Whenever it rains, you see the amount of plastic floating. It's terrible. So I actually think that legislative intervention is now necessary for use of plastics. Most of these companies producing bottled drinks, bottled beverages, maybe government need to start imposing taxes on them. Heavy taxing for those bottles, you know what it will do? They will have to find a way to start recycling their bottles. They have to also join the government in stopping, the massive disposal of plastics. Everywhere you see plastic, every gutter, every drainage, every hole, every part of this city, there are just plastics. So when companies need to show some corporate social responsibility. When we were growing up, I remember there were no plastic bottles. There were bottled drinks.
Yes.
And people valued their crates and their bottles even more than the contents. So as they're selling to you, they make sure you return the bottle.
Yes.
Whether we need to use that same policy on plastics. Whatever you sell, keep your bottle. Don't allow your customers to dispose your bottles indiscriminately. Take the obligation back to the companies. That way, maybe we can see some sanity in the city of Lagos.
And I totally agree with what you have said on, the policy where, there is this heavy policy on bottling companies to pay heavy tax so that they can recycle the bottles themselves if they can collect it back. And also, I think I can't remember during the World Earth Day, I remember having an environmentalist on the radio talking about the fact that some things have been put in place, but we have not enforced them, or the enlightenment are not enough. There are ways you can earn money from even recycling of plastic, which is a business. I have a friend who is close to being a millionaire now from just recycling of plastics. And also the fact that these companies are just producing new plastic every single time, and they're not necessarily bothered about the recycling of the plastic, and it's causing more harm. Now, what do we need so much effort to be put in place to have such a policy in place?
I don't think it requires a lot of effort. What it requires is political will. It doesn't require any effort at all. A lot of serious effort. What government needs to say, yes, enough is enough. It's time to stamp out, the indiscriminate disposal of plastics all over the country. It's not just in the city of Lagos. Yeah. Lagos is more pronounced because the dams, the gutters, the what do they call them? The big gutters, the drainage ways, all over the city. Yeah. They're all filled with debris. 99% of them plastic. Pure water plastic, bottled water plastic, bottled drink plastic, all sorts of plastic, including the ones from parties that are used to dispose of food. It's enormous. It's too much. There needs to be some kind of orderliness injected into the system.
Okay. Yes, and I totally agree with you. Now, also, let's look at the issue of the gutters. You have said it's the responsibility of the government. But in a time like this, how do we canvass for community development to also look into this? Because as much as we want to call on the government, the people in these communities are the ones that will be affected. The government can come sympathize with you and say, oh, we are going to do this, we are going to do this. How can we, charge communities to take initiative in ensuring that they do something about the drainage system within that region, within their means, while they should in the bit of doing that, they are averting any greater danger until they get the government support?
I actually think that the duties we have, governmental duties,
yes,
we share to the private citizens are already too much. They're already overbearing. In Nigeria, people build their homes. After building their homes, they erect their boreholes. After erecting their borehole, they build their fence. After building their fence, they provide their own security. After erecting their own procedure, they build their own gutter. After building their own cover, they build their own slabs. After doing that, it's so much. After doing all that, they pay taxes to the government. Oh, I didn't mention electricity you have to provide for yourself. Then, I would not encourage more duties to be invested on citizens, because citizens are doing more than enough.
Okay.
Taking over quite enormous amount of obligation that ought to rest on the government. And since that is not happening, what I think government needs to do is, I think priority setting is important. Yeah. Why I keep mentioning priority setting is that most times we hear government approves budgets to buy bulletproof cars for lawmakers, and money runs into billions of naira, and half of that money could solve a drainage problem. Why would the country prioritize buying luxury cars for lawmakers, for instance, or some state officials over a collective problem that poses a wider danger to society? So sometimes it's not a question of resources, it's a question of what government considers as its priority. Some of the things government spend money on, from my perspective, are not necessary. There are things we can do without.
Okay.
So the scarce resources, available resources we have, how can we pressure the government to apply those resources on things that are much more pressing and urgent? What are the kinds of conversations that we need to have, that need to be had between citizens and authorities?
I want to find out from you. The Lagos State government has taken away the Saturday environmental sanitation. Do you think that bringing back that strict policy of, not going out until 10 a.m. and, having, I remember growing up and we used to have these agents that go around to ensure that, you are keeping your environment and your surroundings clean, you're cleaning your gutters as much as possible. Would bringing back that policy into Lagos have any impact on the flooding?
I don't think Lagos State really outrightly abolished that. On Thursdays, they observe cleanup in all markets.
In markets, yes.
So observe cleanup. And apart from that, Lagos State government has also formed, I think they've mandated the formation of CDAs across the city. And most of the CDAs are functional. And if you go across the city, you see most of the CDAs, they are taxing themselves, they are bringing, what do they call it, the payloaders to grade their roads, inner city streets. They are providing gates. You see increasing number of gates across in Lagos, and those things are being done by CDAs, and the CDAs are taxing themselves, are taxing residents. There is no place in this country that residents and landlords association are as effective as in Lagos. So that is to tell you that even though they've taken away the Saturday sanitation, different mechanisms have replaced that, which are still ongoing. And what happens now is, I think Lagos State is trying to democratize access to basic services. For instance, if you do not have their PSP getting to your location, I think there is a number, they've published numbers on certain websites. They will publish the name of the contractor covering that region. So you can actually just place a phone call to that person, the contractor, covering your region, and they extend the service to your community. So if you have a functional CDA, your CDA makes that application on behalf of the area. They register with the PSP, they pay their regular monthly collection dues, and pronto, they start coming to your area to collect refuse. So those mechanisms have been very helpful. So taking away the Saturday, they took something in one hand and gave up also another. So I don't think it's causing really any major gap.
Let's look at some of the SDGs with regards to flooding. I think there are about 6 of them, which is flooding goal number 1 to no poverty, zero hunger, ensuring healthy lives. There is also quality education. There's clean water and sanitation. There's also decent work and economic growth. There is SDG 11, which also affects flooding, sustainable cities and communities. With the consistent trend of flooding and the response from the state government and federal government, how close are we to achieving these SDGs?
I'm sure you know the answers to those questions. So, to avoid demotivating ourselves by how far behind we are from meeting target, I actually would encourage that emphasis should be laid on making sure citizens have a good life, target or no target, goal or no goal. The ultimate goal of every city, without somebody sitting down in New York and setting those standards and targets for countries, to me, is for look at a lot of the Scandinavian countries. They're well known for their solid standard of education. They are not doing it because somebody sat down and developed goals and defined goals and targets for them. But because they realize that a good quality of living is a component of the right to life. It is recognized as part of the human rights mantra itself. that citizens should live in healthy spaces. Citizens should live in safe environments and, healthy environment. So I think that should be the refrain driving city planners, to ensure that things work and things function for the for the generality of citizens living in that space,
Yes. I want to say thank you so much for taking time to speak with us. My last question it's a very personal one, and I would like to hear from you. When we're talking, what is now? My question is a one question, but it requires three answers. So what is now for Victoria? What is next for you? And what is something you want to do that you have not done?
What is now for Victoria?
Yes. And what is next for you? And what is something you want to do that you have not done?
For now, I'm a researcher, and I'm trying to transition into fashion and designing to keep my mind away from a lot of bad news.
Okay.
That's what I'm doing now, And in the future, I would love to see. I also have some projects to work on connecting young people to opportunities.
Okay.
It's part of a campaign I'm running to stop the massive migration. Young people have lost faith in the country.
Okay.
They actually believe that they can only make it elsewhere. Where the grass, the pasture is
greener.
Called greener. I know that there's no greener pasture anywhere. There is nowhere you can make it without putting in the work. That is what I believe. So I'm thinking of a program that helps youths to discover their potentials and connects them to growth, investments, opportunities, and connections that helps them to restore their confidence in this called Nigeria.
Thank you. So what's something you want to do that you have not done?
Maybe sleep more.
That's essential. Sleeping more is essential. More is essential.
I would love to sleep more.
All right. I want to say thank you so much for your time. Do well to enjoy the rest of your day. And I'm hoping that, our government would listen and our people will continually to do right. And like you rightly said, there are too many government responsibilities that have been saddled on the citizens, and that is already more than enough. And I want to use this opportunity to appreciate citizens for taking up these responsibilities for their own good, even though there is a responsibility on the government to do these things.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, listeners, for listening.
All right. Do enjoy the rest of your morning.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. This has been The Big Question on Women Radio 91.7. Victoria Ebezim Ohaire has been my guest this morning, the Director for Research and Policy, Spaces for Change. We've spoken about the impact of flooding on Nigerians, and I'm hopeful, that, we might not be able to hit nail on. And like she rightly said, we have made some very drastic errors, and it's almost impossible to correct those errors from the very beginning, but to manage them effectively. And I'm hoping that the government will do all in its capacity to ensure that they get it right. Still in the spirit of the holiday, Ramadan Mubarak, Ramadan Kabir to all of our Muslim brothers and sisters. In the spirit of celebration, let's also do right to keep our environment, and let's make sure that we stay safe at all times. Let's help those in need, let's share, let's spread love, and as much as possible, let's be good citizens. My name is Daniel Adaja. At 10 o'clock is Radio Doctor, your free health consultation radio program. Real doctors advise real people. We'll be having Dr. Linda K.